Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this timely discussion focused on the growing demand of pro bono services in East Africa and how pro bono services can deepen the legal empowerment agenda. My name is Amy Ongeso. I work for the Legal Empowerment Network that is convened by NAMATI, and I am based in Nairobi, Kenya. So the Legal Empowerment Network is the largest community of grassroots justice defenders in the world. We bring together more than 3,000 civil society organizations and more than 10,000 individuals. Our goal is to cultivate a global movement of grassroots justice, one that is capable of collectively tackling the greatest justice challenges of our time. So we work together to help people to know the law, use the law, and shape the law to fight injustices. If you haven't yet, I invite you to be a part of the network and help us to put the power of the law into people's hands. I will share a link where you can see more about our work. Now I invite Patrick, who is my co-convener, to introduce himself.
Thank you, Amy, and hello, everyone. It is really a pleasure to co-moderate this session, and I welcome you to this pro bono roundtable. My name is Patrick Karanja. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I work with Advocates for International Development as a project lead Africa based in Nairobi, Kenya. And in this role, I coordinate activities for FOID and the East Africa Law Society, particularly on our partnership on promoting the culture of pro bono in East Africa. We welcome you to this session and look forward to this being an engaging forum where we can all learn from each other. Please note that this session is being recorded. We ask you to kindly use the chat function to introduce yourself, and also feel free to write any comments you may have or any contribution or questions as we proceed with the webinar, and we'll be able to highlight this to our speakers. Just to note that we expected to have opening remarks from the leadership of the East Africa Law Society. However, I am informed that they are still held up in an ongoing session at the ELS Leading Law Firms Forum. And as such, we'll therefore start this session, and if and when they join, we will allow them to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. Allow me to just briefly introduce FOID, Advocates for International Development, and also to highlight the objectives of this roundtable before we welcome our amazing speakers for today's roundtable. FOID, or Advocates for International Development, is a global charity that was established in the year 2006 with a vision to see the law and the skills of lawyers being used effectively in the fight against underlying causes of poverty in the world. Today, FOID is the leading global charity that harnesses legal expertise globally towards achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And we do this by mobilizing pro bono support from world top lawyers. Currently, we have more than 50,000 lawyers in the world in our network, and also have worked with more than 850 nonprofit organizations in different jurisdictions in the world. Some of the work that FOID does, in fact, one of our most ambitious projects has been to develop a guide on sustainable development for the legal community. And we do believe that through this, the legal community and businesses can work together in mainstreaming sustainable development goals as a core part of the operations. About FOID, we are registered as a charity in the UK, but we have presence in East Africa and Southeast Asia. And in Africa, I lead the program work, working with other like-minded stakeholders like East Africa Law Society, NAMATI, leading law firms and like organizations to support access to justice and strengthen rule of law. Allow me now to just briefly highlight the objectives of this roundtable. We aim to have a discussion on what pro bono work that different actors are engaged in. We also want to look at the challenges and opportunities that different actors have faced while engaging in pro bono work. And we would like to share any lessons that we have learned to identify best practices in ensuring that pro bono legal services become part of the practice for not only our law firms, but also our organizations that are working in access to justice and the rule of law. And we will be given a brief case study from FIDA Uganda that will also highlight the work they are doing, and that will show the importance of legal empowerment, other legal empowerment actors, especially in terms of crises like the COVID-19 global pandemic we have, and also to have a conversation on what kind of support can the legal community provide to these other actors in the legal empowerment sector. Now, may I hand over to Amy, my co-convener, to kindly introduce our amazing speakers. Amy, over to you.
Thank you, Patrick. One thing I will agree with you is that our panel is quite very interesting and very amazing. So it's my pleasure to first introduce Aisha Abdallah. She's the partner, head of dispute resolution at Anjawala and Kana here in Kenya. So her practice focuses on commercial litigation with a particular emphasis on fraud, economic crime, and disputes over land, the environment, and natural resources. Aisha is dual qualified as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and solicitor of England and Wales. She has substantial experience in complex, high-value cross-border litigation. In 2017, Aisha was appointed to the ADR arm of the Mauritius Chamber of Commerce and Industry, alongside some of the world's most eminent arbitration experts. She is the lead author of Kenyan chapter of the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th editions of the International Arbitration Review. She's also a member of the Africa Users Group for the Singapore International Arbitration Center, member of International Association for Defense Counsel, African Arbitration Association, and Delos Dispute Resolution Board of Advisors. Aisha is part of an expert team that has drafted anti-money laundering, remittances, and mobile money bills for Somaliland, and is the lead author of the Kenya chapter of the 2018 Chamber's Anti-Corruption Global Practice Guide. She's also the lead author of the ALN Anti-Corruption Guide 2019. Aisha provides training. She also writes and speaks on a wide range of contentious issues, including international arbitration, corruption, economic crime, and pro bono work. Aisha is rated and recognized by both Chambers Global and Legal 500 for her work. Welcome, Aisha. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Amy. I'm slightly embarrassed by such a long introduction. Thank you.
No, but it's good so that people know who exactly is on the panel. Very impressive, Aisha. And now it's my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Annette Mbogo, who is the Executive Director of Kituo cha Sheria. She is an advocate of the High Court with 14 years standing and has a Doctor of Philosophy in Law from the Southern and Eastern Africa Regional Center for Women's Law in the University of Zimbabwe. Dr. Mbogo has 14 years experience working in civil society, more so in the area of legal empowerment and social justice issues. As she said before, Kituo cha Sheria is the oldest legal empowerment organization in East, Central, and the Horn of Africa. The organization runs and coordinates legal empowerment programs for poor and marginalized communities through legal aid and representation, advocacy, governance, community partnerships, and paralegalism. Dr. Mbogo has over 10 years teaching experience at the University of Nairobi School of Law. Her areas of interest are gender and women rights, human rights, public interest lawyering, and access to justice and clinical education. Some of her publications are a critique of the participation of women in the Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission, strengthening women's voices in the context of agricultural investment, and an analysis of Kenya's response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Annette, you're welcome, and you could say hello to all of us.
Thank you, Amy. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of this roundtable. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette. Now I'm introducing Andrew Sananga, who is the Executive Director from Legal Aid Forum Rwanda. This is a position he has held since 2008. For 4 years, from 2004 to 2008, Andrews was a senior legal advisor to the National Semi-Traditional Courts, Gashasha, that were charged with trials of people suspected of having committed genocide in Rwanda. In 2012, Andrew was among the 3 legal experts nominated by the Ministry of Justice in Rwanda to oversee the development of a legal aid policy. Andrew holds a postgraduate diploma in legal practice from the Institute of Legal Practice and Development of Rwanda, an LLB from the National University of Rwanda, and an LLM in criminal justice and international law of human rights from the University of Rwanda. Andrews has contributed enormously to legal reforms in Rwanda, which ushered in the legal aid policy, legal aid bill, reform of the penal code and criminal procedure code, and many more pieces of legislation that favor access to justice for the poor and vulnerable in Rwanda. Welcome, Andrews. You're mute. It would be nice to hear your voice.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Amy, for the introduction. I'm glad to be here.
You're welcome. Luke McMichael is Pro Bono Legal Services Officer at A4ID and supports the daily functioning of the Pro Bono Broker Service. He's a South African qualified lawyer and has over 5 years of experience in the legal profession. Before joining A4ID, Luke worked in private practice as an environmental lawyer with an international corporate law firm in Johannesburg, where he worked primarily on large-scale infrastructure projects in the renewable energy and mining industry. As a lawyer, he also has experience in commercial contracts, corporate law, and land using planning law. Luke has also worked at a mining research and consulting company based in London, where he developed expertise in mining and environmental law in a variety of jurisdictions around the world. He holds a Master's of Law specializing in environmental law. Luke, you're welcome.
Great. Thanks a lot for the introduction, Amy, and it's a pleasure to be on the panel.
Next, we have Sam, who is the Director of Pro Bono, Senior Counsel from Trevor Smith, LLP, based in the UK. Prior to his current position, Sam spent 12 years in the firm's dispute resolution team, during which time he was promoted to Senior Counsel, ranked by Legal 500 as a rising star, and co-led the team, which won Commercial Litigation Team of the Year at all 3 major legal awards. Earlier in his career, he was selected as a judicial assistant to the Court of Appeal, and also seconded to the Serious Fraud Office in a high-profile role in one of the regulator's blockbuster investigations, where he was described by the director as a major asset. Throughout his career, Sam has played a significant role in the firm's pro bono practice, with a particular focus on acting for victims of domestic violence and international development work. He has taken a lead role in shaping the firm's pro bono work, including creating the Domestic Violence Advocacy Unit, and a team to act for victims of human trafficking. He also runs the firm's partnerships with a number of pro bono brokerages and with human rights organizations. Since moving into this role as Director of Pro Bono, Sam has reconfigured the firm's pro bono strategy to focus on 4 key areas, which include climate, environment and sustainability, diversity, inclusion, social mobility, vulnerable groups, and rule of law. Sam.
Thank you, Amy. I also was not expecting quite such a long introduction, but it's a real pleasure to be asked to be part of this panel and to speak alongside everyone that you've listed so far. Thank you.
Great to have you on the panel, Sam. And last but not least, we have Lynette Dutwa-Lubulwa from FIDA Uganda. FIDA works to advance gender equality and the empowerment of women through the promotion of human rights and by increasing access to justice through the provision of legal services. Lynette is a graduate of the University of Pretoria Center for Human Rights, where she got an LLM in Human Rights and Democratization in Africa. Prior to joining civil society, Lynette was a legal researcher at the Constitutional Court of South Africa and the Supreme Court of Kenya. Her research interests include gender justice, minority rights, children's rights, socioeconomic rights, and constitutional law. Lynette.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, Amy.
Now on to the questions for our discussion today. Perhaps we'll start with you, Aisha and Sam, as litigation lawyers. Could you please briefly describe the pro bono from your firm's perspective and the kind of work this involves?
Thank you, Amy. So at our firm, we decided that because of very limited resources, we needed to focus on what we thought would be strategic in terms of pro bono work and have a lasting impact. So we decided to focus on 4 theme areas, which are enhancing democracy and good governance, improving the rule of law in Africa, addressing flagrant injustices, assisting charities, and sorry, there's a fifth one, which was essentially using the fact that we're a full service law firm and that we have a network across 16 countries in Africa, so that often we are able to coordinate pro bono work across several jurisdictions, which is helpful. So we introduced these themes, and the idea is that we use them to selectively filter the requests for pro bono work that we receive. We receive numerous requests, many of which we can't assist with, but where they fall within these 5 areas, we get volunteers within the firm to undertake the work and to be supervised by at least one partner. We treat pro bono work in our firm as the equivalent of billable work. So it counts towards billable time recording for our associates. And during our appraisals, we actually recognize this as a valuable contribution to the firm and to our communities. So it's something that we reward our associates for, and we incentivize everyone to be involved in a certain amount of pro bono work during the year. We were also concerned about quality, so we focus more on quality than quantity, and we wanted to make sure that pro bono work is adequately supervised and resourced, and that is why we have quarterly reporting. My committee sort of has an overview of the type of work we're doing, and we try and stick to the same standards that we use on our billable work. So we try and make sure that no one is being shortchanged simply because it's pro bono work. The types of advice we give, I mean, where it's charities, it's any type of legal advice that we can provide within our area of specialism. We give a lot of structuring advice to charities who are setting up or expanding. We do a lot of legislative drafting for people, but we also give non-legal support. So for example, our business development team has helped Flip Floppy, which is championing the ban of single-use plastics in East Africa. So our BD team works closely with Flip Floppy to increase their profile, to cover their events and to support them and to help them network as well. And our managing partner sits on the advisory board, so we give a lot of strategic advice, which isn't necessarily legal. Whatever we can help with, we try to, and we don't necessarily try to limit it to a particular type of law or advice, as long as we think we're good at it. But we recognize we can't do everything and we're not good at everything. Besides charities, we also support individuals, but often the individual requests we receive, we have to refer out to people like Kituo cha Sheria. So our threshold for individual work is that it has to have a public benefit angle. So there must be an issue that we think transcends that specific individual and is of wider interest. And then we believe it will be impactful and strategic for us to be involved in. So an example of this is that in 2016, there was an elderly couple who were threatened with forceful eviction from their house of 40 years. This occurred just opposite our previous head office, and actually their house was demolished while they were inside. This was covered in national television, and we felt strongly that this was a case of flagrant injustice. And we said that, there would be no point being a large law firm in Nairobi if this could take place opposite us and there would be no redress. Now, the issue was that the people who were behind the eviction and the demolition were very well connected. They had support within the land registry, within the police and senior government agencies. So we had quite a fight on our hands, and we brought civil and criminal proceedings. Recently, we have won at the Environmental Land Court. We've established that our clients are the rightful owners of that land and that they're entitled to renewal of the lease, and that the fraudsters' purported fake documents must be extinguished and cancelled. But the fight goes on. We are continuing with our criminal prosecution, and the other side is appealing. And this will last many, many years. So sometimes our support is a matter of months. Sometimes it lasts several years with Safari Doctors, for example, there's a partnership we have with another charity we support, which is Bono Hospital. And this is about increasing access to healthcare in a place like Lamu. So we have held a webinar for these people to try and think of innovative ways of increasing access to healthcare. So what I'm trying to say is we look at pro bono very widely. We don't only think of ourselves as lawyers, we think of ourselves as citizens who have a duty to use every single talent we have, whether it is being on a board, whether it is fundraising, whether it is networking, whether it is using our contacts in government to help people wherever we think it will have an impact. And we measure this. So we measure the number of hours our people spend, we measure impact, we go back to recipients when we ask them for feedback. We're not all the way, but we're improving in terms of what we do. I think that's enough. There are a number of challenges we face, but I don't want to take up too much time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisha. Quite an elaborate pro bono scheme you have. What's very impressive is that you encourage this kind of practice within the firm. At least I know from a civil society perspective, we're always murmuring and complaining and saying, where is pro bono? Where is this? How can they support us? But it's also good to know that from your perspective is that you don't just take all the cases. It's a very strategic selection, and for the reasons that you've highlighted, more so resources, I guess, and also trying to see the lasting impact you can achieve. Sam, is this the same case for you, or how does pro bono look like for you in your context?
Yeah, I'll just say I thought Aisha's answer was really impressive. It sounds like a very well-run practice. From my perspective, it's probably best to answer it from two different angles, if you like. The first is my angle as director of pro bono, so I have overall responsibility of the firm's program, and the second is as a litigator and as a lawyer that does some of the work as well. So in the first instance, as the director, I oversee the entire firm's practice, which you set out the sort of 4 pillars that we build across. So climate, environment and sustainability is the first one. Diversity, inclusion and social mobility is the second. The third is vulnerable groups, which is equivalent to access to justice, and I'll come back to that one. The fourth is rule of law. So it's a very broad program, and yet it is focused so that we can say no to some work and we can say yes to other work, so that everything is complementary as we build. So I'll come back to some of that, but I oversee that across all of our 13 or 14 different specialist practice areas. I have tax lawyers, employment lawyers, finance lawyers, capital markets lawyers, and all of them need to be fed impactful pro bono opportunities that will interest them and that will complement our overall strategy. So they're very different types of work that they undertake. And then if I come to the kind of work that I do as a lawyer and the element where I'm sort of best skilled and where I have teams that I oversee, that's in our vulnerable groups or access to justice pillar. And the groups that we represent under that pillar include a lot of work for domestic abuse victims and for human trafficking victims in a kind of more generalized, what we call over here VAWG, which is violence against women and girls sort of subcategory, if you like. So that's a big focus for me and a big focus for the firm in our practice as well. So my day-to-day is doing court cases for domestic abuse victims and for human trafficking victims. I'm a solicitor advocate, so I go to court, do the advocacy as well, and I have teams that I develop to deliver that kind of work. So I've got 50 lawyers in a domestic abuse team, 40 lawyers in a human trafficking team, and I will receive instructions and allocate them to different teams and grow leadership around that so that they can represent those clients. And separately, we're trying to build multi-firm alliances so that we can expand and scale that kind of work as well, which we can talk about later. So that's the kind of my day job element and where I do my lawyering. But if I come back to the director role and the oversight across the firm and give you some examples of some different types of work we do, if we go back to the climate and environment pillar, the first one, we act for strategic institutions, if you like. So we act for the Impact Investing Institute, which, as you might imagine, is encouraging impactful investing and thoughtful and sustainable investing on a global scale. We act for the Green Finance Institute, which is a client which is facilitating the greening of our economy and encouraging global investment from the kind of clients that we act for, private equity houses, asset managers, etc., but in a climate and environmentally responsible way. And we act for the World Wildlife Fund. We advise them on regulatory challenges and how they can position themselves to encourage financial institutions to perform better and perform more responsibly. So those kind of clients are very different. And Aisha was talking about strategy and impact. You know, in that space, we are being strategic. We are targeting impact. We're working on new financing mechanisms that don't exist, and I'm trying to leverage the expertise I've got. I've got one of the leading financial services teams in the city. I've got top private equity lawyers that any corporate might want to instruct. So how do I leverage that skill set, but do it in an ESG or climate and sustainable impact investing way, you know, to make a difference? So that is a very different challenge to how do I represent this victim of domestic abuse in court and get her a protective injunction. So I think what is nice about my role is that it's very, very varied in terms of what is on my desk any particular day. And the challenge is to use all the different skill sets that we've got to have an impact in as many different ways as possible, but with a focus. And the focus is the type of program that I described. So that 4-pillar focus, everything we do is complementary. So as we grow, the story that we can tell in each area and the impact that we have makes sense, and it increases. And the more involved you get, the better the opportunity, the better your experience and expertise develops, and you can then have more impact and so on and so forth. So it's a gradual build out, if you like. But just to conclude that piece then, if you think about the kind of work that we do, we work for individual clients, we work for strategic institutions, NGOs, social focused enterprises, and we also staff clinics. So we staff 4 different clinics on a rolling basis that give employment advice or family law advice or general advice to the public at large who have nowhere else to turn effectively. So those are the sort of the key elements of the program. And I operate both as a lawyer who does his own litigation and encourages and builds teams to sort of identify and meet needs which exist particularly in that VORG space. But also my primary role is to drive 500 lawyers to do more and to facilitate them to do more. And to do that, I have to bring in very exciting clients and interesting and novel projects and make sure they've got the right skill sets and training and support to deliver it. So I turn to people like A4ID to find some of those clients for me as well. So that's a sort of overview as to how I operate and what we do.
Thank you, Sam. It's quite impressive, you know, the number of lawyers or the number of people in your team who are there to help to do this kind of pro bono work, and how you leverage your other clients also to support this kind of pro bono work. I mean, coming from a civil society background, let me tell you, we are green with envy. I wish we could have, you know, that kind of, you know, support, you know, the team within the legal empowerment organizations. And so this takes us to Dr. Annette and Andrews. You had the region's legal aid and pro bono organizations, and I dare say also legal empowerment organizations. So what does pro bono mean to you? And what is the difference between pro bono and legal aid? Who do you support? What kind of support do you give? And how long does this support last? And the million-dollar question is, how do you sustain your pro bono work? So we'll start with Dr. Annette.
Thank you very much, Amy. So I think for us, we kind of combine both, you know, the law firm kind of approach, as well as a more community grassroots approach towards pro bono work. And for me, I would say pro bono work, as the term means, is just for public good. And I feel that legal aid actually is an aspect of pro bono. And so what we see our work as being more of bringing together first, legal practitioners together with community-based paralegals to kind of achieve social justice within our communities. So for us, we, as I said, we are the oldest legal aid organization in East Africa. And for the last 48 years, Kituo has been promoting access to justice for communities, grassroots communities. And our only criteria is that a client must be an indigent client, must be vulnerable, must be marginalized. And that is what then sets the tone as to whether we would take the case or not. And we work in specific mandate areas, that is land, labor, housing, succession, human rights in general, and forced migration. And we've seen a lot of these key mandate areas actually now being broadly expanded. And so we are looking at other areas like health, we're looking at environmental justice, and now increasingly with the COVID pandemic, we're also venturing into gender justice issues. And so what we seek to do is, other than handle individual cases of individual people with individual claims, we also handle public interest cases. And the public interest cases are mainly more strategic with an impact on a greater community. And so in this kind of gives us a lot of leeway as to the kind of areas that we can engage in. So if any case has a public interest element that may focus on governance, on democracy, on any of our key mandate areas of access to justice, then would be willing to take it up. Now, unfortunately, unlike my colleagues from the law firm kind of environment, we don't have many legal practitioners in-house within Kituo to do this kind of work. So at the moment, we have around 15 in-house counsel. And actually with this 15 in-house counsel, we can reach around 3,500 clients per year. These are clients on single welfare-based cases. And we really rely a lot on our volunteer advocate scheme that has around 600 volunteer lawyers who sign up to our scheme. And by signing up to this scheme, we can then refer cases that we cannot take up in-house. And so kind of that really helps a lot to manage the work that we are handling in-house. In addition to the volunteer advocates who we work with, we also have a really strong grassroots network of community-based paralegals. The community-based paralegals are actually made up of community members who are trained by ourselves and trained consistently and regularly, and they understand some aspects of law. And through this basic understanding of the law, they're actually able to refer cases to us, identify human rights violations, and sometimes, provide fast aid, legal fast aid to community disputes that exist. And so we have a really strong network of community paralegals reaching around 500 across the country. And through this network of volunteer advocates and community paralegals, we have sustained our work for now over 48 years. And I think this has been a really good approach, because a lot of our programs are actually funded by development partners, and we are currently not receiving any state funding to support the access to justice work that we are doing. So because the volunteer advocates are undertaking these cases without any kind of financial benefit, basically pro bono, then we find that we are able to still maintain a huge backlog, a huge number of cases that we are handling. And at the same time, even when funding may be reduced, you are sure that work will still continue because we are really relying on the input of our pro bono advocates. So we at times find ourselves also partnering with law firms, and I think ALN is one of the firms that we are exploring partnership with, and we tap into the expertise that they have, because sometimes you may find that we are handling a really technical case that requires special skill and expertise. And when we have such technical cases, then we rely a lot on law firms that already have this kind of expertise and collaborate in some of those cases. And sometimes this collaboration is not just with law firms within Kenya, but also we have worked with law firms even out of the country, such as Lead Day, in handling cases that really are are technical and need some extra area of expertise. So I would say that our approach has mainly been, so how do you combine, these two approaches of direct legal aid services, but at the same time, how do you build the capacity of the community to kind of know law, use the law to address their own issues and on legal issues. And with that partnership between legal practitioners and the communities, then bring some kind of transformative change within the legal space. And that we see every particular player. So in this case, the advocate or the legal practitioner, the community paralegal, and the community person here who has been faced with an injustice. How do they participate within this, what we call the justice ecosystem, so that we all are able to then finally achieve a society of equity and justice. So I think in a nutshell, I would say that is what we do, the kind of support we provide. And our support when we really join hands with a community or an individual to ensure they have access to justice, our support will last throughout until that person really is able to achieve the justice that they have been seeking through us. So I think for me, that is what I would say. Over to you, Amy.
A lot of work must have gone into cultivating relationships with these 600 plus volunteer advocates in your scheme for them to say, okay, we will take the cases. So that's quite commendable. And also the partnership between the community-based paralegals and the advocates to address the justice gap or to address the demand and supply of legal services. Without knowing, I think you, or implicitly, you are then highlighting the difference in approaches conceptually and ideologically on legal aid and legal empowerment, which of course is a question we'll come to later, or an issue we'll come to later. Andrews, so how does Pro Bono work for the Legal Aid Fund? How do you sustain this work? What kind of support do you give? And who comes to legal aid, to the Legal Aid Forum for legal aid support?
Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you, Friday, for inviting us to speak on this important panel. I think Dr. Annette, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you, Andrews, very clear.
I think Dr. Annette covered a lot of things that I would have spent a lot of time talking about, because I know what they do. We have kind of similar approaches to legal empowerment and legal aid. Perhaps I could, coming back to the questions you asked, Amy, I think it's very important to make a distinction between the work we do as legal aid service providers, as CSOs, and the work that lawyers do, the two speakers. We aim to help the citizens. The general objective of their intervention as pro bono lawyers and ours as legal aid organizations working with the citizens is at least in our case, is very different. Now, pro bono is, in our context as Rwanda, we have always considered this to be free, and legal aid is not free. That is the difference. I mean, from the perspective of people we serve, pro bono lawyer would give free services as part of the effort of a lawyer to contribute to society. I think the first speaker did mention about the public good you want to give back to the community. But I've been in this work for now close to 20 years. Legal aid is not free. I should, and that's why Annette kept referring to the work of donors coming in, donors coming. What are they coming in? What are they coming in to do? It's because the work we call legal aid is associated with the cost. Probably that may not be the case in Kenya. I know it's the case in Kenya for sure, because I work with Kito. I've worked with them for many years, but legal aid has never been free in terms of the cost that is associated with it. Now, I'll give you an example. The Legal Aid Forum is working with 30 lawyers compared to, so we have we doubled the number that Annette said, 10 lawyers and then the volunteers. These 30 lawyers are paid to provide legal aid. So for our clients that are referred to us by members of the Legal Aid Forum, the Legal Aid Forum is a network of 40 organizations. So what we do, our members across the country, or even in government institutions, different stakeholders refer cases to us every now and again. And on average, we handle about 2,000 cases that we litigate in court. 30 lawyers that have to litigate. That's a very big workload. And these lawyers are paid by the Legal Aid Forum. So that's one approach. So if you are thinking about legal aid being free, no. From the end users of our services, yes, it is free. The citizen will not be charged, but the lawyers who are going to help them in court are paid by the Legal Aid Forum. And where does this money come from? It comes from these dollars that Annette kept talking about. And it's the same even for state legal aid providers. And that's why we've been struggling in South Africa to make sure that our governments have legal aid bills, have legal aid budgets, whereas our colleagues in London are struggling with cuts of legal aid bills. For us, actually, is even the struggle is different. We are struggling with our government to accept legal aid as something that government should be paying for. And that's why there's a cry all over East Africa to have bills. In Kenya, they have it ready for the past couple of years. They have it in Tanzania. Even when these bills are adopted they are adopted, regulated into law, still there should be a budget that government should put for people to access services. So whether it is, you're looking at it from state legal aid service providers, still there's a budget attached to it because different countries use different means. I'm glad we have someone from South Africa, the Legal Aid Board South Africa. How much money that the government of South Africa put into legal aid is huge and enormous. They also are partners, and we've been partnering with them for a long time. So pro bono must be free, because we are asking you, as a lawyer in your own law firm, how much can you contribute to society? So one of the challenges we have in Rwanda, for instance, we have pro bono as one of the means to renew our certificates, because I'm also a practicing lawyer. So we have to do at least one pro bono in a year. The statement is very vague in the acts, in our acts, the Advocates Act. So you either do it or not. And sometimes I don't see them requiring this to renew my practicing license, but it is a requirement anyway, so that you should provide pro bono one case at least per year for your certificates to be renewed. But that is hardly done, okay? And it's hardly reinforced because, again, the burden goes to that lawyer. The lawyer in your...
On the question, sorry, Andrews, on the question of challenges, I beg to interrupt that we will address challenges later.
Okay, if I'll still be on the platform. But also, one approach is that we have to hire these lawyers and we have to get money to pay them. But also, I agree with Annette, we have other initiatives that are free, like the use of paralegals. We have 3,000 paralegals across the country that we try to train, and these are volunteers in our case. I know in some other countries, paralegals are paid. We cannot get money to pay these 300 plus. We train them as volunteers in a way to cover things that they do, but we don't hire them on a salaried basis. So we also have legal officers that we use. We have also recently resorted to use of ICT as tools to empower who have employed toll-free and other means. So how do we sustain this? It's a challenge, and I'm glad you're saying we should be looking at that at a later stage. But our beneficiaries are people who cannot afford the services for lawyers. So, and we do have a lot of them. So mine is that. Other than that, I think Annette did cover a lot of things that we share in common. But mine was just to make a distinction between pro bono and legal aid, which is really very in our context, at least we know they are different. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting that, Andrews. And focusing just on how unsustainable legal aid is as a concept, as a practice, because just the amount of money required to support a legal aid scheme is impossible. I agree with you on the challenge of getting states to finance this kind of work. It's painful. It's a monumental task. The advocacy doesn't stop, but we're still hopeful that legal aid will be funded in our African states. So lastly, finally coming up to you, Luke. So as a pro bono legal officer at A4ID, what does this mean to you? What does pro bono mean to you? And how is your pro bono work like?
Thanks, Emi. And I think I'll just elaborate a little bit on exactly what A4ID does so everyone can understand how we approach pro bono. But I work in the pro bono team. We operate a pro bono brokerage or clearinghouse. So for anyone not familiar with this concept, what we essentially do is we broker pro bono advice between our network of development partners on the one hand, to our network of legal partners. So just kind of looking at these two networks, we support over 930 development partners. And these are all organizations, and they're predominantly made up of NGOs, nonprofits, and we also work with some social enterprises, developing country governments, bar associations, and international institutions. And in terms of this network, it's obviously a large and diverse network. To partner with us, these organizations must be working towards advancing at least one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 targets, and they are varied. They range from issues around access to justice, healthcare, education, climate, and environmental rights. All the organizations must be focused on international development. Although we're based in London, we don't support domestic organizations, and we focus on international development. So that, of course, means we work with a lot of organizations. A lot of our development partners are working in East Africa. It's just important to emphasize we only support organizations, and we don't work with individuals. And I think, as Andrew pointed out, the distinction between legal aid and pro bono is that pro bono is free and legal aid is not. An important thing to note,
we lost Luke. A shame. So when Luke comes back, hopefully we'll be able to learn more about the pro bono model. I see Luke, we had lost you.
Oh, apologies. Yeah. Did I just drop off momentarily? Sorry, apologies. I think should I just continue?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just a point there, the organizations that we support, well, we do support organizations, and a lot of them, they won't qualify for legal aid. So we're trying to fulfill that gap in the market where there is no legal aid available to them. And just quickly looking at our legal partner network, in total, we have over 50,000 lawyers that we can rely on in terms of providing pro bono advice. And most of them are large full-service law firms, such as Travers Smith, Sam's firm. We also work with chambers based in London, and in-house legal counsel of several corporates. The bulk of our network is based in London, as we are a London-based organization. But over the years, our network has expanded, and we brought on board more law firms. So we have very strong networks in the US, throughout the EU. And then we also work with several leading domestic law firms, including in East Africa, such as Anjawala and Kana. So in terms of the types of issues we support, because our network of development partners is really large, the types of requests are really diverse. So we get requests on a weekly basis, and we circulate them to our legal partners on a weekly basis. The requests can come in a number of jurisdictions, and we place requests in over 100 jurisdictions. A lot of them are concentrated in the UK, the US, and Europe, but we also get a high volume of requests in South Asia and also East Africa. And in terms of the types of requests, I think it's incredibly diverse. And you can kind of group them into operational standard work organizations require to function. And it's really essential that they get this advice. So this can include looking at contracts, corporate advice around structuring an organization, employment issues, data protection issues, intellectual property advice, tax advice. And we also get, quite specialist requests around, say, for example, sanctions advice, financial regulation advice. And for that advice, I think, as Sam mentioned, it's virtually inaccessible for NGOs to be able to access that without getting pro bono advice. And then on the other hand, so we have these operational type requests, but we also increasingly do strategic or programmatic work. So unlike the operational requests, which tend to be quite discrete and quite short term, these projects can last, over several months or even years. And we tend to focus on quite high impact projects. And these are around supporting partnerships, covering kind of a range of issues. And I think later on in the panel, I'll cover some of our examples of our more strategic projects.
Thank you so much, Luke. It's been very interesting listening to all your responses around pro bono and what pro bono looks like. But I'll just give a small anecdote for when I first joined civil society and was working for a pro bono organization. I used to work for Kituo Sharia. And so there was a discussion about pro bono services, and somebody said, oh, no. I thought it was free, like we're discussing right now. And they said, oh, no. We mean pro bono rate. So if he charges 6,000, his pro bono rate is maybe like 1,000 USD. And I, needless to say, was very confused. But I'm glad, it's because, the context and what the demands are on legal services in the country and in the continent. Now I hand it over to Patrick to continue with the next set of questions.
Thank you, Amy. And it's really interesting and impressive to hear the amazing work everyone is doing. Seems, although from different seeming sides of the divide, commercial, corporate law firm, civil society organization, we all seem to be geared up towards the same thing. And that leads me to, I'm picking up on this conversation, because it's obvious that you're all focused on ensuring that you're engaged in work that is impactful. There obviously does seem to be need for more collaboration. Just a question to you. Giving an example of Kenya, we have about 15,000 lawyers admitted as advocates. We have about 20,000 lawyers in East Africa. How do we create the gap? How do we solicit more support from the legal profession? I believe if we had 15,000 lawyers available to Dr. Annette, she'll do amazing work. And also I recognize, as Dr. Annette and Andrews indicated, the other players in the access to justice system, they are pro bono paralegals. I believe they are community grassroots organizations. How do we create the interlink? And I think also from the work that Luke indicated on pro bono brokerage, my question to us is, how can we then structure the pro bono offering so that it is attractive to more lawyers, so that we have more available legal mind and resources to support the amazing work, because we all seem to be geared towards the same end. And I'll start with you, Andrews.
Yeah, thank you very much, Karanja, for bringing that up. I wrote you on the private chat that I should be leaving. I have another meeting. Now, I like the concept of pro bono. Now, we've been struggling with government. Those of us who have been in this area for many years, I know, Annette, you're not new, but your predecessors, whom I have been working with for many years, we've been trying to make sure that there is a budget for legal aid. And when this concept of legal empowerment is coming up, when you're talking about legal empowerment, I'm looking at other approaches, like you mentioned, paralegals, both community and prison paralegals, and also mediation. I know many countries in South Africa we have mediation that are being carried out for free. Like in Rwanda, mediation is mandatory before you go to any court. If something that the litigation, if something you want to, if the subject matter of that case is below 3 million, it's also another tool we are using. Talking about using local initiatives and many other approaches that are not expensive to our community, but that are very accessible, that our communities can reach. These are also alternative means of access to justice, broadly put into the ADR with its complexities as we know it. But pro bono, as an initiative, I know I'm glad we're working with FID, is something really that I'm looking for to explore here and make sure that lawyers use their own resources to help the community. I think it can be a very good alternative to legal aid. Because with the legal aid, as I said, and I know it's the same in Kenya, Uganda, colleagues that are here. Because if you can, like now we have a project that Clifford Chance is funding through FID, it's their own money, although they can also outsource, but you also outsource because you already have what you have. Their services in pro bono are being complemented by other actors. But I think pro bono is the best approach. Because pro bono, as I said earlier, I'm looking at lawyers using their own resources to help our poor people, other than struggling with budget. I think pro bono is a concept that we should explore more. And I'm glad our sister Aisha said they choose. It's very good to be strategic and choose which cases to do. You can't do everything. Like now, for us, we do everything. We do gender-based violence, we do land, because our communities we're here for the community. We cannot choose strategic litigation of a certain matter over the other unless we want to ignore communities. So I think pro bono is something we can explore and maybe find alternative ways to reinforce pro bono. And pro bono, also exploring pro bono, although I said it is free, but also lawyers need fuel to move around the country. They need communication, they need everything. So in the end, whereas I prefer pro bono over legal aid that have been doing for close to 20 years now, but I also think pro bono has to be strategic. Thank you, Patrick. And if you can allow me, I can leave the platform. It's very interesting. Maybe you should have given us like more time, more days, bring us one place to discuss. This is very important, especially for our context.
Thank you so much, Andrews. And we hope that this would be the beginning of a conversation that we can continue with, even as the COVID restrictions are being relaxed, and that we can actually have an actual roundtable with even more stakeholders in the coming days. But thanks so much for your input. And perhaps Dr. Annette, maybe picking up on what Andrew said, do you see opportunity for leveraging and mobilizing more pro bono support from the legal community? How do we need to package these as an organization so that we mobilize more, assistance?
Yes, I think I agree with you that there is a need to kind of see how we can leverage on the, the legal community. And this is a conversation that we also had in a side event to the NGO forum under the auspices of the African Commission for Human Rights, where it was felt that there's a need for, bar associations, legal practitioners, legal empowerment organizations as ourselves, and community paralegals to just come together and see what are the commonalities in terms of the work that we are doing. Clearly from this conversation, we are seeing that we are all working towards the same goal. So that being a common aspect of our work, then how do we then put together our skills, our resources, as well as our expertise so that we can achieve that goal? And I think what even in this conversation, what we failed to do is to have more engagement with, for instance, corporate law firms that are engaging in pro bono work, even with the bar associations, because even when you look at our work and especially our engagement with grassroots communities that are involved in legal empowerment, a lot of the times you find that legal practitioners still do not understand the role that such grassroots communities play within this access to justice movement. So I think to kind of demystify all these myths around access to justice using different players, there's a need to kind of bring us together so that we can have an exchange around what we are doing, what our roles are, clearly delineating those roles and seeing where the commonalities will be. I think one good thing also would be, because sometimes it's for us from where I sit as a, working within a legal empowerment organization, sometimes we find that law firms that are engaged in pro bono practice seem a bit far removed. We don't know how to approach, we don't know how to approach them. We are not sure that we are packaging the correct language even as we approach them. And so I think even we, as we are kind of seeing the need for this partnership, is for us to also relook as legal empowerment organizations as to how are we packaging our messaging towards the legal community that can then come in and support our work. And I think if we're able to create the appropriate message, and here I think this conversation is one of the ways we can do it, we can find a lot of commonalities and a lot of partnerships that we can build on. So I think we were working on this before with Namati, and I think we intend to do more of this kind of conversations, and hopefully reach out to members of the legal community, the bar associations, for instance, the East African Law Society, the Law Society of Kenya, and the branches that exist, so that they can also see how they can collaborate with us. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Anit. And I heard you are looking for a contact at Anjawala and Kano. Luckily, we do have Aisha. I think she has about 100 lawyers behind her. Probably you'll have a side conversation and see how you can progress that conversation. But Aisha,
we actually already have, so we are good to go. Yes.
Awesome. But Aisha and Sam, I mean, hearing this from the obvious need, and there's so much that the lawyers can do to support other access to justice actors. What do the civil society organizations or organizations like Kituo and Legal Aid Forum need to do? How should they package themselves to be able to solicit interest from a commercial and corporate law firm? And also, as you answer that, what kind of challenges do you foresee? What kind of challenges have you had in terms of implementing your pro bono practice? And finally, is there a value add? And do you see as, I mean, one of the comments you hear from most law firms is that we no longer do pro bono. We used to do that when we were a smaller law firm. Now we are a commercial and corporate law firm. How do we ensure that there is alignment so that corporate and commercial law firm can see their role in supporting this agenda? Aisha, we can start with you, then Sam.
Okay, I'll start. I was actually, when I forget the rest of your questions, you'll remind me what they are. Okay, so I think the first one was how can civil societies and charities, maybe how do they approach larger law firms or, start the engagement? And I think there is a messaging issue. My general view is that corporate, commercial, or larger law firms are careful not to be seen to be linked maybe to something that's very controversial, because they online. So I think what we do, I mean, we act for many different types of clients. But what we do is, this is one of the reasons we have agreed themes in advance, that we will say these are issues that are important to us and we believe they're cross-cutting and they shouldn't interfere with our work. So something like rule of law, there's no client of mine who can object to my pro bono work on rule of law, because if I can't enhance rule of law, I can't help them either. So I think part of it is having an idea of what, helping the law firms understand that cross-cutting issues that don't impact on their work. In fact, they support what they're trying to do. In terms of messaging, I think, we are careful to, as larger law firms, not to be seen to be engaging in what might be a political issue. So I think what I would suggest is that there's corporate firms have a large role to play in non-litigation issues. So I know litigators like Sam, they totally understand why we should do pro bono work, but people who do non-contentious work don't sometimes realize what a large role they have to play. So they can help charities and civil society with the establishment, with basic documentation, with structuring, with tax advice, with real estate advice. None of that is remotely controversial. So there shouldn't be any issue for that law firm to assist. I think the issue is not whether or not to assist. The issue is how to assist so that it's win-win on both sides. And I think from our perspective, the fact that Sam and his law firm commit so much resources to this, it's because it makes business sense, actually. So from our perspective, it helps us recruit lawyers because our young lawyers are very interested in giving back to the community. They don't want to just make a lot of money or bill a lot of hours. So actually explaining to people why it's good for them. If Dr. Annette only spoke to me about what she needed and didn't speak to me in my language about what was good for me, I don't think we could have a proper partnership. So understanding who you're speaking to and trying to make it make sense for them, I think is important. So messaging is important. Even when I approach clients to assist with some of our initiatives, I talk to them in the language they understand, why it's good for their business, for example, to be involved in these initiatives to support rule of law, to support good governance. I talk to them about things they are interested in. So even if I happen to be a human rights lawyer, which I'm not, I wouldn't use human rights language to approach corporates. And again, if you are Amy and you're approaching us about community land rights and I act for all the large developers, you have to use a different language and a message that is attractive to me, because there's no way I'm going to lose work because I'm trying to help you. So I think there's a way to do it, and I think it involves a little bit more thought. But I think definitely large law firms and corporate firms have a big role to play. Remind me, Patrick, your second question was?
It was on challenges. I think you've touched on the packaging and the messaging, but I wanted you to highlight some of the challenges you've had in terms of from your practice perspective of the pro bono.
Yes, I think the challenges we have is just that we have too much demand. In a country like Kenya, working in Africa, where the government is often not meeting basic services and needs, it's forcing the private sector to play a much larger role than in countries like the UK. So, some of the things we're asked to do really should be done by government and state actors, but unfortunately, it's down to us to help. So I think we are constantly struggling because we're inundated with requests for assistance, and there's a limit to what we can do. So it's, for us, what we try and do is look, reach out to other people to see, can we work together so that we share that burden? How do we work with Ketuo? How do we work with FIDA Kenya, which we do? How do we work with these other organizations? The burden is somehow there. It doesn't mean we meet every need. There's also a lack of awareness. So I find that individuals will be struggling because they can't pay for legal services, and they will just, email lots of detailed requests for assistance, which really we're not well equipped to deal with. So I think setting up a network where we can cross-refer work. It may be that I can help with part of the issue, but I can't help with another part. It would really help us if we knew who should we refer these people to, because you feel bad turning them down without a solution. So I think we can help each other provide a solution. And Patrick, your third question was?
I think that was part of it. So that's okay. That covers my questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and Sam, is this the same experience you have from your perspective in terms of, collaboration with civil society organization in terms of support? And could you share some of the challenges also you experience in developing your pro bono practice and in the work you do?
Yeah, I think, again, I agree with a lot of what Aisha said, but in a way, I think you might be looking at the problem slightly the wrong way round. If you've got 15 to 20,000 private practice lawyers in the jurisdiction that you want to leverage, and you're asking how can legal aid or charities get there, it's very difficult adding more demands onto legal aid entities and NGOs and say, you go and solve this problem, when actually you've got 15, 20,000 commercial lawyers who live to solve problems, and it is them you're trying to tap. So if anything, I would try and flip it and say to the law firms, if you look at the USA, Australia, UK, for example, they've all been on a journey for the last 20, 30 years where they're getting to a place, if they're not already there, that pro bono is a really important part of what they do. It's prioritized in the same way, it's treated the same way, and the most profitable firms have the biggest pro bono practice. I think the two things, one of the key things to understand from a law firm perspective in those jurisdictions certainly is making money and doing good don't have to be exclusive. It's not one or the other. As Aisha says, this is at the moment there's loads of great law firms in London you could go and work with. They might pay you lovely salaries, but people coming in, the next generation, they want to have an impact, they want to be involved in social issues, they want to be inspired, they want to do commercial work, but they want to address things which are affecting them and their families. So actually having a fully functioning pro bono service genuinely addressing issues is a very attractive recruitment tool, is a very attractive retention tool, because once somebody is on a multi-billion-pound case for a decade, being able to step out of that to take on an individual's case is a very energizing part of their day. So you need to build that into the infrastructure. So I think easier said than done, but in many ways what you want to do is say to the law firms, how are you going to build a pro bono network to serve the charities and the NGOs and to complement the legal aid offering? And as I said, it is about network and it is about collaboration and it is about working together. We've got something in London in the UK called the Collaborative Plan. It's now something like 60 odd law firms, and every day or every other day I get an email come across my desk saying, we've got this NGO, they need help, we can't do it, can you help? And somebody else, one of the other 60 law firms, picks it up and says, yes, we've got it, and 2 minutes later said, don't worry, all done. And so we are stronger together, if you like, and pro bono is a nice exception to the rule where we're not competing with each other. We are supplementing and complementing each other's expertise and networks, and that is how you sort of deliver at scale. So I think my starting point would be, don't put the burden on the charities and the legal aid entities and say, go and solve this problem and convince all these law firms to do work. Go to the law firms and say, if you are truly a top tier law firm, and this answers your last question, Patrick, but if you are a top tier law firm, then show me that you do everything at an excellent level. Where's your pro bono practice? What do you target? Much like Aisha said, where's your strategic direction? What impact are you having? And how do you translate that to your clients? Because your clients will be interested in that. You'd be amazed when you ask your top billing clients what it is they think about when they're not buying businesses, and they will tell you, well, actually, I'm quite concerned about, the opportunities that my daughter and her friends will get, or actually, I've seen this in the news, and I'm concerned about that direction of travel. But don't worry, we're not here to talk about that. They will engage with you if you tell them, well, actually, yeah, we do engage with those issues as well, because that's part of being a responsible business. So so that probably, you could write a book about this, but that would probably be where I'd start with this, is try to get the network and the infrastructure from the leading law firms, and you need senior management buy-in, and give them a platform, and give pro bono a platform. If you've got something which rewards your top corporate lawyers in the country, then stick a column on to say top pro bono lawyers as well, and start to shine a light on it, and all of a sudden you'll find lots of people are interested and want to be part of it. So, and it takes time, it takes a long time, but you have to start there and sort of push in direction. So that would be my sort of starter for 10 in relation to how do you scale it within a jurisdiction. As to what challenges, so my challenges are are trying to respond to that. So my firm's over 200 years old. I'm the first person to have this job. So, you know, I then have to build a program. And then if I have a practice area now, we do thousands and thousands of hours every year. I can't possibly monitor that. So I need buy-in across the entire firm. So I need partners in every department. I've created pro bono committees in every department, and they have partners on them, and they run their cases and they run their relationships precisely as they would if they were being paid for it. So that takes time as well. You need buy-in, and as Aisha said, you need to bring in perhaps not the most controversial client first, but you know, a soft start. There's lots of work you can do for the entity itself before you get to the issue that they fight for, which will use all the corporate skills and the commercial skills that your lawyers have. So that's what I would say on the challenges front, is you've got to build the infrastructure and you've got to build senior buy-in, and they've got to champion it. And I'm very lucky. I'm at a firm where I have a direct line to my managing partner and senior partner, and they put it in all their emails. You know, this is what we've done pro bono, this is what we've done commercially, and we've delivered for both these clients, and we're very proud of both of these things. And it goes in weekly updates from heads of departments, and it is a common part of our language and what we think is important. So that is very valuable. So you need senior buy-in. And then I think I started at the end, and so I've answered your question about small firms saying we don't do pro bono anymore. I would be completely the opposite. I would say actually big firms, that you are the ones with the capacity, you are the ones who are benefiting the most from law and what it is as a business. So show us that you are socially responsible, and show us that you are committed to the wider community, and use these skills that you've got to make a difference. So I wouldn't be a fan of the argument that says you're a big firm so you can't do it. In the opposite, I would take my hat off to small firms who find the time to do it, but I would strongly encourage the bigger firms to lead and take ownership of this, and collaborate with smaller firms to facilitate their opportunities too. I'm going to get off my box now. That was a bit of a politician's speech, wasn't it? But I think you got my view.
Thank you so much, Aisha and Sam. That was a really useful, comment and guidance for us, even as we start these conversations with the leading law firms in East Africa. I think we look forward to engaging with you as we advance this conversation. But perhaps just to close with Luke, I think this is a part of your day-to-day work, trying to work with leading law firms, and successfully you've done that in the UK. What kind of support would FOID be able to give to or assist in terms of getting this support for the law firms in East Africa and helping them to get the buy-in? Of course, working with firms like Aisha's firm, Anjawal and Kano. Luke?
Thanks, Patrick. And I think maybe just to touch on something Andrew mentioned around the partnership with Clifford Chance. I just thought I'd maybe talk through an example. Maybe that will answer some of your questions, Patrick. But just to illustrate, with the example is it's a cornerstone initiative that FID has developed, and it's being supported and funded by Clifford Chance, which is a UK-based law firm and one of our legal partners. And we've co-developed a long-term project that proposes to support civil society organizations, and including the Legal Aid Forum, and it's about 20 of its members that provide free legal advice to the poorest and most vulnerable communities in Kigali. And through this initiative, Clifford Chance's lawyers will be working in partnership with one leading commercial law firms in Rwanda, the Rwanda individual lawyers from the Rwandan Bar Association, university legal aid clinics, which will include, obviously law students. And in terms of the project, it looks to really provide capacity building and training to the CSOs. It also looks to research and map all the pro bono actors in Rwanda to really get a good sense of all the different actors involved in the country. It will also provide some financial support to the CSOs, and also the lawyers involved will also be providing with providing some legal advice. And it's really looking to partner Clifford Chance with local law firms and the CSOs in Rwanda to really develop a culture of pro bono in the country. So ultimately, the beneficiaries of the initiative will be the poorest and the most vulnerable communities in Kigali, who often don't have access to any legal services. And I think Rwanda has an issue. I think the proportion of lawyers, it's about one lawyer to over 16,000 people. And there's a huge access to justice issue in Rwanda. And I think Andrew also elaborated on issues around legal aid in the country. So I also just kind of wanted to flag quickly that this initiative is ongoing. It's kind of ultimately going to conclude in 2024. So any Rwandan law firms on the panel, anyone's interested, this is really just a call to get involved.
Thank you, Luke. And Amy, it seems from all these interesting discussions, our work seems to be cut out for the next several years. But I want to give it back to you, Amy, to give us your comments, and also to invite Lynette to give us a quick update on her case study.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the very interesting contributions that you've made. And, just going back to one point that was made that I think Aisha said it, and then it was followed up with Sam, when we're coming as human rights organization, not such a controversial issue, maybe a soft start. Oh, I mean, I agree. In retrospect, when I look back, I see, wow, I must have made some very controversial requests because I did not get any response. But predominantly what we are doing as legal empowerment organizations is that we're challenging the system, and challenging the system is a highly political issue. And so therein lies also some ideological differences between what law firms and human rights organizations are going for. And I know Sami said making profit and doing it do not have to be mutually exclusive. But when the rubber meets the road, then for us, at least what I have seen, it becomes very clear who's on what side. So it's a very interesting conversation and great to pick up some points to move forward. And now, as we invite Lynette, we're looking at a concrete study where during the COVID-19 pandemic, lawyers were not able to do much. I think here in Kenya, I don't know about the UK and any other jurisdiction, is that in Kenya, lawyers were not, what do you call this? They're not seen as an emergency service. So you can imagine, injustice was still going on during the pandemic. So what was happening to people who were experiencing, especially domestic violence? So this could be it could be of great interest to all of us to see how people were handling injustices during the pandemic. So, Lynette, and just a reminder to the participants, please feel free to put in your questions, your observations, your ideas in the chats. We will address them later. And now, Lynette, I'm inviting you to share your case study with us that FIDA Uganda did on the impact of COVID-19 on the rights of women, specifically looking at how institutions and how organizations have responded to gender-based violence and continue to do so. So Lynette, what is your case study all about, and why was it important that it be carried out?
Okay, thank you so much, Amy. And so as Amy had mentioned, the case study was part of a global study that investigated the role that legal empowerment groups really played in this unprecedented time that we have faced, where all of a sudden, like the COVID-19 measures were implemented, and it meant that GBV cases shot through the roof. Like, we know that all of the circumstances work together to really, create like the perfect storm with everything counting against women and making the GBV cases so much higher. And at the same time, the normal institutions, the normal mechanisms that are available to have some level of redress and also justice were not available. So the study looked at what different legal empowerment groups all across the globe had done, like what were the innovations, what creative solutions that that legal empowerment groups come up with in this time to specifically support women facing domestic and intimate partner violence. And specifically, FIDA Uganda did a case study on, to document and share our innovation. And what we did, like what our quick shift was in how we operate, when all of a sudden we were not able to use our cars and we were not able to, courts are not even open, but we can't move around and get to our clients. And we faced a total lockdown. What did we do as FIDA Uganda? And really, the hero of our story of 2020 is our community paralegals that we call community legal volunteers. So we train both, both state and non-state actors as community paralegals. And this is part of our strategy and part of our approach. And in order to increase our reach, but also to increase sustainability, if you train someone who is already on the government payroll as a community paralegal, and he is much more able, it won't be the priority of his life to serve as a community paralegal, of course, because he has so many other duties, but at least his basic needs are met, and he's able, like giving that extra training and that extra, building that capacity to view the work that you do as a government official, even, and through as a paralegal, really brings that shift. And so, so because we had that network of paralegals, we really leveraged on that, and we organized an online training, like a refresher course, and to equip and strengthen our paralegals in all of the different areas. That's the first thing that we did when the lockdown came, and then other things that we were so dependent on our community paralegals for services to actually work. And so they would take megaphones in the different districts and the different parishes and villages where they are working, and they would walk in their villages with megaphones, and they would announce, they would raise awareness about gender-based violence, what it is, and that it's not okay. It's like the basic awareness raising that they were doing within the communities, and then also telling people where to get help, how to get help, where to come and report if you're finding yourself stuck in your house and with an abusive partner. So so on the ground they were raising awareness. And so we did some, what's part of our strategy also was to have some radio campaigns and to tell people about a safe word that you can call. So you just say the safe word, you just give us an idea of your location. And immediately after that, we have to find a community paralegal to come to you and find you, and then to take the steps to actually give you the help that you need. And we've recorded so many success stories that where community paralegals have intervened, have gone to the houses where we knew there were cases going on. Like, we would follow up with our existing clients, and we would send people to those houses to just go and do spot checks and to just go and check on the people who live there. And the paralegals also served as that, they served that role in just linking people with different services and letting them know that the services were available, and just helping them to go from their homes to the medical center, to the police, to making sure that making sure that court orders are actually adhered with a bit later on in this game. And so really thanks to having that system in place, we look back and we see cases where there really was change, and it's just because they were available on the ground, they were first responders, and they were known in their communities.
Wow, that is so impressive and quite moving, Lynette, sharing with us what the Barefoot Lawyers, as we would like to call them, Barefoot Lawyers on the ground, were able to do during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think one of your rallying calls, one thing you realize is the importance of these Barefoot Lawyers, the grassroots justice defenders, at the site where the violence is happening. They have this legal knowledge and they can assist to a certain extent. We're in a justice ecosystem. What do you think, or what are suggestions for the lawyers, the law firms, or the advocates to support these actors on the ground during times like this, in maybe even in a future crisis? Do you see a role for pro bono services?
Absolutely, and absolutely, and I think something that this is my view, that our justice infrastructure was not it wasn't designed to reach people in rural areas and in rural communities, especially here in East Africa. A lot of people are left behind and are left out from what we call the formal justice system. It's simply not accessible. And we have seen statistics where only 10% of Kenyans are able to access justice through the formal system. So what happens to the other 90%? And I say that, and I think what my request would be to law firms and to those providing pro bono services is to acknowledge the role that these so-called informal justice actors play, to acknowledge the fact that we can't actually provide justice services to everyone, but if we work together, we are able to bridge the gap between formal and informal, and to actually make justice more accessible. And I think what I would propose is stronger partnership between law firms and between grassroots actors. I mean, we've heard some of the issues that have come up here because, Amy, as you've said, as legal empowerment groups, we go for the controversial issues and we go for the political issues because so many times that's exactly what the causes are of human rights abuses. And so I can understand the reluctance from a private law firm to get involved in some of those cases. Like I can really understand that. But still, in as far as it is possible and as far as it's feasible to actually really work together. And I feel in a way like that private practice can be a gatekeeper that keep community paralegals out of the system and that keep them from being recognized and keep them from being taken seriously. Because if you have the private practice and not being supportive of the legal recognition of actors that play an important role, but that do not have the same training, that do not, that can't follow the same structures and systems, and it would really not be helpful to justice in an overall sense. So what I would say is that definitely for these pro bono law firms to come alongside these community paralegals and to be willing to really learn from one another and to see the way that the community paralegals are able to infuse the justice process with elements of restorative justice and the community and like people-centered approaches where the approaches of law firms aren't necessarily that there would be this willingness to learn together and to walk together.
I really feel you and I hear you. Maybe I'm being a bit biased, but listen, Lynette, I'm feeling you because I think, Patrick was saying, maybe we need to have, and I think Annette was saying, maybe we need to have a conversation between legal empowerment organizations and law firms, but I think the conversation needs to go deeper, especially in our context. I think the conversation needs to happen between community-based paralegals in far-flung areas where there are no advocates and there are no lawyers and law firms, and just seeing like there's such a need. There's a whole, people are in so much need that one request we would have of like Aisha and the law firm is a bit more flexibility. When we come to you with requests, we really, listen, it's a justice ecosystem. It's overwhelming. We need you. I won't even mince our words. We need you. But there's a flexible way in which we can, work together to address these justice challenges. So I agree with you. This is the beginning of a conversation. And really, Patrick, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think we need to have another quick one with grassroots justice defenders and with legal empowerment organizations, because I think there's a bit of learning that we can do from each other. And with that, I hand it over to you, Patrick. Thank you so much, Lynn, for sharing those valuable experiences with us.
Thank you so much. And I agree with you, Amy. There's still so much work to be done. It's really good that all our speakers are taking initiative, and we have a lot of lessons to learn from them on what they've done and probably where to start as we advance this conversation. Hopefully next year, we should be able to even travel more, meet people at different locations, and just have those conversations. How can a law firm, maybe in Nairobi, work with a law firm in Lokichogio to help some community legal empowerment or actors in the grassroots? And I think I do agree that partnership and networking is really important. And as FOID, we really look forward to be able to see where we can support, and we look forward to collaborating with Namati, Kituo cha Sheria, and Jawal and Kana, and all our partners to see how we can work together to advance this. There is obviously work for every one of us to do more. And before we close, it might be useful for us to just have some reflections from our speakers. If I could give you a minute or two to just sum up and give us your takeaway from this, and perhaps just your reflections before we invite Thomas to make our closing remarks. Aisha, I don't want to put you on the spotlight, but do you want to start?
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, everyone. It occurred to me that a number of different people are all doing good work, but there is not as much visibility amongst us as to what we're doing, what our priority areas are, and whether there is room for collaboration. So I was wondering whether there was a way, like if there was some sort of website you could click on, or some tool that would tell you that Sam is doing climate change work in East Africa, and then I could say to him, okay, so why don't you support our lobbying against single-use plastics, because there's an overlap between what he's interested in and what I'm interested in. Or perhaps I'm doing something in Uganda with my member firm there, and it touches on something that Lynette is interested in. I think there's a lack of information, and I felt almost that we may be doing similar things in parallel to each other, like ships passing in the night, and we don't know, so we don't then collaborate. So I'm just wondering, is there a way to find areas of common ground that allow people to then reach out to each other and collaborate? I don't know, it's a difficult one to fix, but I do feel that there's that information gap. And also I think the use of the term pro bono in legal aid is not, I think some people might see it in a narrow way, and they may not realize that what they're doing actually is pro bono or is empowerment. They may not perceive it that way, and they may think it's a small box, and what I do for, to protect Karura Forest is something I just do on the side, but perhaps it's part of a wider initiative. So I personally feel that, when you label something, you include the people who are already convinced, and then you continue to exclude others who might see it in a very narrow way. So I think we need to think about labeling, because I know that we have done our own training before, even through East Africa Law Society, where we're encouraging lawyers to get involved in pro bono because it's beneficial to them. But I think by calling it pro bono, only certain people register to join our webinar, and then the rest are like, this is not something I'm interested in. And I wonder whether we can call it something else, like, I don't know, climate change pledge, or I don't know how to call it, because I think that there are people doing good work, but if you ask them whether they did pro bono, a lot of them would say no, but I would disagree. I think they do pro bono, but they don't necessarily, maybe they think if I call myself that, Aisha will flood me with all her requests, and I don't want that to happen. I don't know. That's just something that occurred to me as something we should think about.
Thank you, Aisha. And I'll be coming to Luke to tell us how he can help us moving forward on that. Let me throw the same challenge to Sam. In your closing remarks, what are the common issues you see? What do you propose as a way forward?
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, I think I would echo some of that. In particular, though, I think collaboration has to be the key, or partnerships, whatever you want to call it. And I think that takes a few forms. It's collaboration between law firms, it's partnerships with those leading sort of NGOs and legal aid service providers, if you like. And actually, when I think about this jurisdiction, we have what I mentioned, the collaborative plan for law firms, but there's also an in-house equivalent. So in-house lawyers at major companies also get together and ask themselves, how can they do pro bono? And often from that, the answer is, well, let me go and see if my law firm wants to work with me. And all of a sudden, when the clients are asking the law firm what they do, the law firm starts to scramble around and say, well, what do we do? And who's leading this? And it's all of a sudden, it's very important. So there's lots of different triggers. It could be the client wants it could be the lawyers want it could be the government dictates that you can't apply for government work unless 5% of your time is spent on pro bono. There's lots of triggers different jurisdictions have used to incentivize it. So I'd consider some of the sort of structural triggers that are out there, but above all, look for some leadership within the law firms to start with, and collaboration. Those are the two things. And don't be afraid to learn. I certainly went round the houses when I was looking at this role and pro bono generally, and I spoke to all the established leaders in my jurisdiction. They very generously gave of their time, and I basically interviewed them all at length. And now I'm the one being asked questions by other people wanting to come into this space, and I'm helping as much as I can. So I think where you've got leaders, then try and share that knowledge and grow the knowledge base and grow the leadership base, and sort of build gradually, because it is a long journey, but it's very worthwhile.
Thank you, Sam. Dr. Annette, your takeaway?
Yeah, I think for me, the takeaway is that we have common goals. I mean, we as legal empowerment organizations, sometimes we feel that corporate law firms are just in it to, make profits, but actually we all have a common goal to ensure that there is access to justice, rule of law, democracy, and good governance. And so I think the challenge now to us, on both sides, is to see how can we then kind of reach, a middle ground that we can then begin to work together towards this common goal. I think also issues around having learning exchanges. I think from today also I've learned a lot. I mean, what is Rwanda, for example, doing towards promotion of pro bono practice? It would be nice to know also what is happening in Uganda, what's happening in other jurisdictions within Africa as well as beyond Africa. And I think having these particular conversations is a good way to just learn from each other and see what best practices can we then pick up from other jurisdictions. So I think it's a good start. I know we said that as legal empowerment organizations, we should be finding a way in which we can package our message as we approach corporate firms that may be interested in pro bono work and collaboration with us. And I tend to also agree with what Amy was saying, that sometimes almost 90% of the work that we are doing is pretty much controversial. And so I think then the challenge would be is how do we then still package this collaboration in a way that can attract partnership, but then at the same time help us as organizations that are trying to challenge system structures that may actually be controversial, to still be able to partner and tap into the expertise that may be there within corporate spaces. So I think we are really excited to see how we can bridge this gap, and I think we'll be very keen on moving forward just to identify potential partners as Kituo that we can work with moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Annette. Lynette, do you have one takeaway you'd like to highlight?
Yes, and I have to say that I really have to echo the words of Dr. Mbogo in that, it's so good to have these exchanges to also understand, where law firms are coming from. And I think especially hearing Aisha's, challenges, like how difficult, like just the kind of pressures that you're under, especially as a law firm practicing in Kenya, practicing in East Africa, like knowing, the kind of pressures that you're under and the kind of responsibilities that you carry that are perhaps more weighty than what they ought to be, like to also understand that like the law firms themselves are under immense pressure, and even the good work that they want to do, they have so much, they have so much limitations in terms of time and in terms of resources, and also in terms of like the kinds of work that they can really engage in. So that for me was really, really good to get a better understanding of. And I fully agree with what Dr. Mbogo said, is that I really hope that we can find more areas of common ground and more places where we can really work together and really be partners in ensuring justice for all.
Thank you, Lynette. Luke, talk about collaboration, networking. Obviously, your work is going to increase after this session, but kindly give us your takeaway.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. And I think, yeah, just to echo what Sam said about the collaborative plan, I've been at A4ID for 4 years, and most of the city law firms have, developed significant pro bono practices, and they're really driven by, where possible, having a dedicated pro bono team or pro bono partner or associate. So having a firm champion and having them join a group like the collaborative plan, and I think it could work on a regional level, and maybe EELS is well placed to facilitate something where pro bono champions within the different law firms could join a group and share ideas. Us, A4ID as a clearinghouse, we sit in on a pan-European group of clearinghouses where we get together, talk about our pro bono experiences and just sharing ideas. So that would really be a great way to kind of coordinate and also just promote the work, promote the impact of pro bono in the region, and also cross-regional collaboration. At A4ID, we often, our development partners need assistance both in the UK and Kenya, for example. And there's huge opportunities there, both to provide legal advice to our NGO partners on various issues, but then also for the law firms, for law firms in East Africa to develop contacts with law firms in the UK or the US, not only just to provide advice, but also kind of share experience around pro bono and how to develop pro bono practices. So yeah, I think collaboration is key, both kind of at a regional level and also looking to collaborate internationally.
Thank you, Luke. And Amy, kindly give us your takeaway and final comments.
This has been a very interesting session for me, Patrick, as well. And I think one of the things I'm taking forward with me is that there's a need to learn. There's a need to learn from each other, from the different justice actors within this ecosystem. So if I speak specifically to the context in East Africa, we realize that there's a justice gap, and that even if we have very many justice sector actors, the gap is still widening as we speak, even has been made worse by COVID-19. So when we come to the table and sit and have this kind of honest and open reflections, then we can say, okay, this is where we can address the justice challenge. This is how we can do it together. And if you're talking about community-based paralegals, we as law firm advocates, how can we support them, and how can we support them, take them under our wing, maybe some training, some research. These are conversations that we can take forward. Yes, your work will increase, Patrick, as well, because there will be a great demand to have more chapters of these conversations. But I think narrowing it down to also ideological approach when you try and make justice sustainable is very key. So, and that comes down to ideological approach and how we address injustices.
Thank you so much, Amy. And for me, the takeaway is collaboration, opportunity for different actors to work together. We will ensure as we move forward that we can play a facilitative role as advocates for international development, and with our collaboration with East Africa Law Society and other organizations like Namati and Kituo Cha Sheria and law firms like Anjawala and Kana and Sam's law firm. We really look forward to working with you, and I hope when we call you back to discuss further how to take this conversation forward, that you will be gracious enough. Allow me to just thank you so much for taking your time to participate in this roundtable. It was really, really useful for us. We trust it was as useful to you. And I now want to welcome my colleague, Thomas Istas, to make the closing remarks and end this session. In the meanwhile, we have posted a survey on the chat. Kindly take a minute or two to send the survey. Thank you so much, and we wish you a very good day. Thomas?
Thank you, Patrick. So, as Patrick said, my name is Thomas Istas. I'm the Learning and Development Manager at A4ID, and it is my pleasure today to deliver the closing remarks on behalf of Yasmin Batliwala, our CEO, who unfortunately could not attend this event. She sends her apologies. I would like to start by thanking our moderators, Amy and Patrick, and all the panelists for their very interesting discussion this morning. The importance of pro bono work for the legal community worldwide cannot be overstated. More and more law firms, regardless of size, undertake pro bono one way or another. Certainly, all the law firms who partner with A4ID have put pro bono front and center of their legal practice, as we've heard from Sam and Luke today. Pro bono is actually becoming a branch of legal practice in its own right, with law firms contributing many hours in this way. At A4ID, as Patrick said in the beginning, we put the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, at the heart of our strategy. As most of you probably know, the SDGs were adopted in 2015 by the UN General Assembly as the new development agenda to be realized by 2030. It aims to provide a clear, comprehensive, and universal framework that should lead to end poverty, improve health and education, reduce inequalities, spur economic growth, tackle climate change, and preserve the planet. So a very ambitious agenda indeed. And it is of firm belief at A4ID that all lawyers and all legal professionals worldwide have a role to play to achieve this agenda, and that pro bono work is instrumental in doing so. As we've heard from Aisha, Andrews, Annette, and Lynette, in East Africa as well, is legal pro bono an important tool in ensuring access to legal advice and representation for individuals and organizations who would otherwise not be able to afford legal fees. Many lawyers, paralegals, legal aid organizations in East Africa provide pro bono legal advice to disadvantaged and vulnerable groups, or to the organizations that fight with them for justice. However, as we've discussed as well during this panel session, sometimes there are still misunderstandings about what pro bono is, what legal aid is. There is sometimes a lack of awareness within the legal community about pro bono work, or even about the relevance and interest for lawyers to undertake pro bono work. So we want to work with you to improve that situation as well. So working with its partners in East Africa, A4ID wants to contribute to embed pro bono in the DNA of the whole legal profession in East Africa, and to promote the vision that pro bono work can be a vehicle for sustainable development. A4ID has established strong links with the legal and business communities in East Africa. Working in particular with the East Africa Law Society, we have facilitated various trainings on responsible business practices, as well as provided pro bono legal assistance for organizations in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan. So, as to echo the takeaways from our panelists, we would like to consider our discussion today as a stepping stone to further our work towards developing the culture of pro bono in East Africa, to identify common features of legal pro bono in all countries of East Africa, to convene events and discussions like this one today, through which corporate lawyers, bar associations, grassroots communities, paralegals can exchange about their work, about best practices, and ultimately to generate buy-in and understanding also, as one of the panelists said, what is the business case for pro bono for commercial law firms, and ultimately working all together to bridge the justice gap that Amy just mentioned. So to achieve this, Patrick, our project lead for Africa, will keep working closely with EALS and the different national bar associations or law societies, with the objective of making East Africa a leading region in the world for pro bono work. So I would like to finish by thanking our partner, the East Africa Law Society, and in particular, Bernard Undu, the president, and David Cigano, the CEO, for their collaboration and for inviting us to co-host this panel session at their annual conference. Before we formally close the meeting, I would also like to ask all participants to complete the feedback survey. And so Patrick has put the link to the chat. It's very important for us to have your feedback. And I would like to end by saying that to build this community of practice around pro bono work, we need your active involvement. So if you want to be part of this journey, please complete the survey and share your contact details with us, and we'll be in touch. So thank you very much for attending this session. Whether you are attending remotely or whether you are in Zanzibar at the moment, I wish you a very good day and a good conference. Thank you very much again to all panelists and the moderators for this session. And I formally close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.